Were Jon Jones's critics silenced by his performance at UFC 309, or are there still a lot of unanswered questions, especially when it comes to potential matchups against Tom Aspinall? We're going to be getting to all of that in this video as we do a technical breakdown of Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic. One point I want to make before we look at the clips themselves is how we're going to assess this fight and making sure that we do it objectively. Because I really feel as though people's feelings, both positive and negative towards Jon Jones, have slightly blighted the performance itself. You get some big Jon Jones fans saying he looked back to his prime, he looked excellent. On the other extreme, people saying that he looks completely past it, he looked really old, really slow. The truth is probably somewhere nearer the middle, as is the case most of the time, but we're going to be getting into all of that in this video. And just before we get into the first clip, I would ask that you do subscribe to the channel, like the video. If you're into UFC content, I do about 3 videos a week currently, breaking down fights, making predictions, and then after every big event on a Saturday night, I'll do a 5 things we learned video, things that we learned from that fight. But anyway, let's get into the first clip. Okay, so the first minute and a half of this fight, it was a bit of a feeling out process. Neither fighter really landing anything clean on each other. So we're going to fast forward to 3 minutes 40 in the first round to the first real significant action. And it's where Jon Jones throws this oblique kick. This kick has been a staple of Jon Jones' game for so many years now. Does real damage to that front leg. But as you can see, Stipe does a good job lifting up his left leg to avoid the worst damage. Now, one thing we've spoken about before with this kick, particularly in the Alex Pereira-Khalil Roundtree build-up, is that it can leave your upper body exposed, especially when we're talking about a dangerous striker like Alex Pereira. The last place you want to be is having your left arm down, chin there. Yes, his shoulder's doing an okay job here, but really for someone who's got a really dangerous long left hook, it's a dangerous kick to throw, especially if you miss it. However, we do talk about levels in this game, and we're about to see the levels of Jon Jones' fight IQ. His fight IQ is not underrated because people have spoken about it for so long, but it's just so good. As you can see, Jon Jones misses that oblique kick because Stipe avoids it by getting his left leg out the way. Now, Jon Jones shows that he is being defensively responsible here. He extends his left arm, keeps his shoulder pretty high because, like we just said, your head is an obvious target there. If you follow through with this kick with all your momentum going forwards and you miss, you're really close to your opponent. And if they're a good counter puncher, they can get some really good shots off. However, he does pretty good defensive work here, but that's not where it ends. He continues. The camera angle isn't the best for this, but he smothers Stipe. Again, this is to close the range. When you're in that phone booth style range where you're a distance in which both strikers can connect with each other, you are putting yourself at danger, especially after throwing this kick. However, as you can see, he gets a nice tie clinch on Stipe's neck here, and you can't really see with this camera angle, but he's just hooked his leg like this, and Stipe's leg is like this. So Jon Jones has hooked Stipe's leg there in a prime position for a really nice trip/throw where, let's just remove these lines, where Jon Jones's leg momentum's going that way, his upper body and the grip that he's got on Stipe's neck is sending him that way, completely off balancing him. And through this, he gets him to the ground. Now, one thing that the main thing that I want to take away from this first clip is that even if you think that Jon Jones' pace is diminished, which I agree, I think in this fight he did look slower than his earlier fights at light heavyweight for sure, or if you think maybe he's not quite as sharp as he used to be, which is also a fair point, and we'll get into whether or not I think that's true later. But here, you can't argue that his fight IQ is still there. How many fighters would adapt that quickly, missing an oblique kick, sending it straight into a trip? You know that this is something that Jon Jones has drilled time and time again, and it's just such a good way to start the first round in a fight where there were so many questions that we hadn't had answered because the Ciryl Gane fight happened so quick. But yeah, a really nice way to start the first round, getting Stipe onto his back from a really nice trip. So that's the first reason why I'd argue that that first round was vintage Jon Jones. And the second reason is what we're about to see here. Jon Jones is probably the best ground and pound guy we've seen in the UFC. And this is just an example of why he's so devastating at it and what sets him apart to a lot of other fighters in the UFC. So as you can see here, Stipe Miocic at this point, he's eaten a load of elbows already, and now he's trying to get onto his knees, exposing his back, but just anything to avoid this ground and pound, get back onto my feet. So he's onto his side here, and as you can see, Jon Jones rains down to these elbows. And normally, if you get a fighter like Charles Oliveira, if this much of their back is being exposed, you know, this is actually, we've just gone back a couple of frames. This is probably a better angle for it. You know that Charles Oliveira would hop around at this point, try and take the back, try and get his hooks in and get some kind of choke locked in. Jon Jones, his focus isn't on submissions, it's on ground and pound. So as we can see here, Stipe's really trying to get onto his knees, turtle position, then get back onto his feet. But Jon Jones, with this grip here, and with the weight of his hips going down, all he wants to do right now is flatten Stipe onto his back. He does that with a crushing elbow/forearm onto his face, flattens him out. And then this is just, with 3 minutes, as you can see, 3 minutes, that was the worst circle I think I've ever done. 3 minutes 26 into this first round, Jon Jones has Stipe Miocic exactly where he wants him. Jon Jones doesn't care that he's in Stipe's guard, or it might be a half guard here, I can't really see. All Jon Jones cares about is having Stipe flattened out. And we've had so much criticism of fighters, the wrestlers particularly in the UFC, getting fighters down there onto their back, but they're not really doing anything with it, being content to hold them down because they're worried that by posturing up, they give their opponent a chance to escape. But this just isn't in Jon Jones's thought process. Just moving forward a few frames gives you the best possible example of this. This kind of distance between their bodies isn't something you typically see in the UFC in 2024. Ground and pound, people still use it, but people who are predominantly wrestlers are a lot more conscious about keeping the hips tight, keeping the chest on chest. Jon Jones, his focus is ground and pound, getting his opponents out of there. And he postures up so much, lifts that elbow so high to do the most devastating elbows possible to his opponent. Jon Jones, that's vintage Jon Jones. Devastating ground and pound after showing such high fight IQ with the trip. You can probably tell by now that my main takeaway from this fight is that Jon Jones's fight IQ, it's still the best we've ever seen, and this next clip we're about to see and the finish itself is going to demonstrate that perfectly. But before we get into that, it is worth focusing on what this means for potential matchups against Tom Aspinall and things like that. Before this fight, I kind of went along with the narrative that Jon Jones might be over the hill. He's picking this legacy fight because Tom Aspinall is such a dangerous up-and-comer, and you don't want to put your legacy on the line if you are thinking about retiring. But Jon Jones's ability to game plan for specific opponents and to adapt during a fight, it does make me think this fight, if it does happen, would be close. Despite Jon Jones's aging years, I think he would be able to see things in Tom Aspinall's game, whether it be his high chin, he can be reckless at times, to make it a really competitive fight. I think Tom Aspinall's excellent. He's that next generation of heavyweights, so fast, so dynamic, light on his feet. But I'm still not convinced by people saying that Aspinall would make light work of Jon Jones. Jon Jones finds ways to win. His IQ's on another level. So let's look at this next clip and the finish, where we can see the very best of Jon Jones. I am aware that the sole focus of this video so far has been on what Jon Jones did so well, and that first round was really good. The second round was quite pedestrian, and ultimately it does take two to tango. Stipe was poor, he looked old, he looked slow. He retired at the end of the fight, which I don't think surprised anyone, but he's still a juggernaut. Despite being knocked out by Francis Ngannou, DC, he's shown himself to be so durable through the years. I think Jon Jones recognised that he wasn't going to knock him out to shots to the head, so he decided to target the body. And this shot in the 3 minutes into round 2, for me it was the beginning of the end. So as you can see, Jon Jones lands a really nice sharp teep and a really nice sharp front kick straight into Stipe's gut. You can see that his toes are pointed there, really nice shot. And this reaction from Stipe just shows how much damage that caused. You can see he's completely hunched over. The shot must have taken all the wind out of him. And Jon Jones now smells blood. He recognises that he's got to make the adjustment, target the body. I'm not going to get him out there to the head, so let's target the body. And you can even see the expression. I know this might not be the best camera angle for it, but you can see the expression of Stipe change. His mouth goes open. You can see the pain, even in this side profile. You can see how much this shot hurt. And Jon Jones here, he's looking at Stipe's face. He knows this shot's caused damage. Again, coming back to fight IQ, Jon Jones has made the calculation right. Target the body. That's where I'm going to get a finish. That's how I'll get Stipe out of there. Before we get on to the finish, I do want to look at one more clip, and it's where Jon Jones does hurt Stipe. Jon Jones lands a really nice jab. This jab was actually on for Jon Jones all night. He was really sharp with it, both from orthodox and southpaw. It's a weapon that we've seen Jon Jones use throughout the years, but he recognised that distance was key to this fight, and he almost became unstuck by not sticking to this rule here. So you can see he gets a big reaction from that jab. Keep moving forward a few frames. Again, Stipe's poker face is just gone. He looks really hurt by it. And then a really clean, I mean, that right hand, even if you think Jon Jones, which he doesn't really, possess that one punch power, that's about as clean a right hand as you're going to get. Perfectly on the chin. And Stipe's rocked by it. Now, Jon Jones, who normally uses his range so well, he has to combine that with the fact that he is that natural-born killer. He loves going through the finish. And as we just keep playing this forward, you can see Stipe's just backing up. I'm playing this frame by frame, but you can see Jon Jones just following him down. Stipe Miocic, who showed that awesome movement and head movement in the first Francis Ngannou fight, he just isn't that fighter anymore. Again, it's not a criticism of him being lazy, quite the opposite. He's the ultimate pro, but age does catch up with everyone. So Jon Jones is stalking him down against the fence. He does a little dip there. Maybe to see if he can get Stipe's hands to lower. Trying to get some kind of read off Stipe. Now, Jon Jones, we just mentioned his range and how good his range normally is. This is a time where he thought he had Stipe hurt. He tried to go for the finish, and he actually closed that distance without being really defensively responsible. And as you can see, Stipe, the wounded warrior, is still dangerous. He throws a right hand of his own, which lands flush on Jon Jones' chin. You never really see Jon Jones in these kind of situations where he's in the phone booth, but he thought he had Stipe hurt. Stipe lands a clean right hand on Jon Jones, and the commentary team didn't really make a big deal about this shot at the time. Maybe it was just because Stipe had been hurt a few seconds afterwards, but this was the best shot that Stipe threw in the whole fight, and he got a big reaction from Jon Jones, who immediately went for a clinch. So what can we take away from that? Jon Jones has a great chin. Maybe that's the slightly underrated aspect of his game. And Stipe, what a warrior. Despite being hurt, being really wobbled by that shot, stunned, moved himself back against the fence. Again, a sign of age. He wasn't cutting angles. He wasn't dipping his head off. His head was right in the middle, there to be hit. But he threw back a nice right hand, caught Jon Jones flush. And that was because Jon Jones wasn't sticking to his plan. He wasn't using his range. He entered Stipe's world and ended up eating a big shot because of it. Unfortunately for Stipe, that was the best work that he did all night. It was his inability to close the distance and his lack of activity that ultimately cost him the fight and ended up getting him finished. Let's take a look at the finish itself. Stipe here, again, not closing the distance, allowing the fight to be fought at the range where Jon Jones does his best work. This is just a terrible idea against a fighter who loves to use his range, who has already hurt you to the body with a front kick. You need to be smothering that distance. You can see here, Jon Jones engages his hips, gets ready for a spin. I can see Stipe still looking straight at Jon Jones. Maybe he was expecting a spinning elbow that Jon Jones has used before very successfully. I remember the one against Alexander Gustafsson in their first fight was really effective. Stipe, he doesn't get out of the way. And Jon Jones lands a devastating spinning back kick straight to Stipe's ribs. Look at his body shape there. You can see the indent this kick makes, just how powerful it is. And ultimately, Stipe was unable to recover from that. He went down. What a powerful kick from Jon Jones. Jon Jones knew. You can see in the way, he has his back completely turned at this point. There isn't the sort of urgency to spin straight back around. He knew that he'd caught Stipe at that point. Look at him. I know, again, we're going frame by frame, so it doesn't really paint the full picture. But you can see there wasn't the urgency of Jon Jones. Oh, maybe it didn't connect. I don't want Stipe to take my back, drag me to the canvas. Jon Jones followed up with a bit of ground and pound, but really that was just to show the referee that the fight was over. After this kick, the fight was done. So these are the highlights that I really wanted to pay attention to in this fight. Was it vintage Jon Jones? The second round was very pedestrian. Both fighters did look as though they lacked urgency, there was a big lack of activity, and the pace wasn't quite what you'd expect from two elite heavyweights. But the first round, Jon Jones, that was vintage. The spinning back kick was incredible at the end of the fight. We still don't know how Jon Jones would look against the very best up-and-coming heavyweights in the division, but there were definitely signs in this fight that the fight IQ is still there. Yes, the pace might have dropped off slightly, but Jon Jones finds a way. He will game plan against Tom Aspinall. He'll identify weaknesses in Alex Pereira. Jon Jones is still a real threat. There's no way that he goes into any of these fights as a big underdog, purely because of the way that he can adapt, make adjustments mid-fight, and work out vulnerabilities in his opponents. Let me know what you guys think. If you think that I've been too harsh on Stipe, too praising of Jon Jones, bear in mind I have spoken about the age being a factor before in the 5 Things We Learned video. I don't think Jon Jones is still in his prime. I think he is an older fighter, but he's still elite. That's the main thing that I want to get across. Let me know what you thought about the analysis, guys, and I'll see you guys later.